So what do you do when something looks factorable but you're not exactly sure how to approach it? Something like this with a negative out in front, not always the most pleasant problem to try and conquer, but since it's set up, you set it equal to 0, it's set up in the format where you can do the quadratic formula. Sometimes if it's in question, you just do the quadratic formula. So negative 2 plus x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times a. Be careful here. A is negative 1 times c, which is negative 2. Okay. So all over 2 times a negative 1. That's important. You might not think so, but that negative 1 there basically cancels that negative up there. Good to know. So this is a 4, and we're subtracting, and it's a negative times a negative times a negative, so it is in fact a negative, minus 8. Okay, so 4 minus 8 is a negative 4. Well, look what we have here. Negative 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 all over negative 2. Remember, a square root of a negative is an imaginary number. So negative 2 plus or minus 2i over negative 2. Negative 2 goes into negative 2 positive 1 time. But it also goes into this 2 1 time. So 1i is okay. Technically, it took that plus and minus, turned it into a minus plus, but it's still both. So 1 plus or minus I, or 1 plus or minus 1i, there are 2 imaginary roots. You might notice, anytime you have imaginary roots, they're going to travel in pairs. So anytime you use the quadratic, you end up with a plus or minus. That's the only time you're going to end up with an I, because you're taking the square root at some point of a number that could eventually be negative. And so that's why imaginary roots should always travel in pairs.